This year, 2023, is the 125th anniversary of the Phoebe Griffin Noyes Library, also known as the Phoebe. But our region's desire for a library reaches much further back than a mere 125 years. In 1701, a group of ministers from Lyme and Saybrook passed a charter founding the collegiate school and donated their books to its library. They also solicited book contributions through an agent in London, resulting in a library of over 700 volumes. Isaac Newton contributed several copies of his own works, as did Halley the astronomer. Chaucer, Milton, and Spenser were also represented, resulting in what was then perhaps the finest library in the colonies. In 1716, a deal was made to move the school, which would come to be known as Yale, to New Haven, angering the original founders in Saybrook and Lyme. Constables were sent to transport the books, but angry citizens overturned the carts in Saybrook to prevent their books from being taken to New Haven. Order was eventually restored, but the Battle of the Books stands as powerful testimony to the deep-seated commitment citizens of Lyme, which at that time included Old Lyme and Saybrook, have long held for their libraries. Beginning in the 1730s, books were circulated from East Lyme to Guilford each month via shelves strapped to the back of a donkey. By 1816, still lacking a bricks-and-mortar library of their own, ladies of the Female Reading Society met weekly on Lime Street for
reading from the Holy Scriptures, and any other book whose tendency is to elevate the mind and improve the heart.
Both Phoebe Lord, who hosted the Society's first meeting, and her daughter Phoebe Griffin Noyes were members. In 1892, Evelyn McCurdy Salisbury wrote that the Female Reading Society, now the Ladies' Library Society, owned
about 2,500 bound volumes, besides about 3,500 books and pamphlets which are unbound.
Mrs. Salisbury was a philanthropist who offered to donate a building in the Old Lyme part of Lyme for either an academy or for a town library. But the Ladies' Library Society worried that it was neither fireproof nor centrally located. Enter Charles H. Ludington, a wealthy merchant from New York and husband of Phoebe Griffin Noyes' daughter, Josephine. The new library would be built at the site of Phoebe's birthplace, the old Lord homestead, donated by the Lord family. The foundation was dug in December 1897, and on June 23, 1898, 125 years ago, the Phoebe Griffin Noyes Library was opened with speeches and a grand celebration. Nearly 200 years after its initial effort, Lyme finally had a library of its own. To generate income in the early days, the new library, under the purview of the Ladies' Library Association, hosted the first shows of now famous Lyme artists, including Henry Ward Ranger, Child Hassan, Willard Metcalf, Martha Brown, and others. By 1913, the town of Old Lyme chipped in $100, enabling the library to receive matching state grants. By 1921, the library held over 10,000 volumes and was running out of space. The Old Lyme artists now had a gallery of their own, what is now the Lyme Art Association, and the revenue previously derived from hosting their exhibitions was sorely missed. Deficits were mounting, and the library was headed for financial disaster. Enter Catherine Ludington, daughter of the founders and a remarkable Old Lyme figure, a women's suffrage leader, a delegate to the Institute of Pacific Relations, and an important force in the founding of the United Nations. She nonetheless kept her role as president of the Old Lyme Library a major priority. Within just 2 years of her taking the reins, funds were raised to offset the accumulated deficit, and by 1925, a new wing was built, relieving the concern, at least for the time being, about adequate space. During Ludington's presidency, the library came to assume an enviably prominent position among its peers. In 1935, just 10 years after the new wing was completed, Ludington stated the case for the next major library project.
For many years, we had realized that we were outgrowing the present building, even with the fine McCurdy Salisbury addition, and that larger space was needed for the children, both for their own sake and for the protection of adult readers.
On July 21, 1937, the new children's room was opened and dedicated to Ethel Saltis Luddington, who had been a major advocate for children's learning before her death in 1922. No recounting of the Phoebe's history can be complete without mentioning Joe Dunn, who was hired as director in 1948. He attended conferences and took courses to keep himself at the forefront of the new science of library management. By 1950, he offered a short course for students on how to use a public library. When they completed the course, they earned the title of apprentice and were paid 50 cents an hour. These students became the library pages, receiving minimum wage and providing valuable assistance. After Joe's death in 1967, his wife May, a former teacher, took over and guided the library with help from the Connecticut State Library Association. While improving services to the area's children was always an ambition of the Phoebe Griffin Noyes Library, it wasn't until 1977, with funding assistance from the town, that the library was finally able to hire its first full-time children's librarian, Barbara Billings. During the late 1970s, the need for more space was once more apparent. A planning committee was formed, and a feasibility study and plans were commissioned. But alas, funds were unavailable and plans never got off the ground. In 1982, Ann Tuck McGregor was hired as director. Ann had a master's degree in library science and an interest in theater. She had written and produced several children's programs for public TV station WVIZ. Under her directorship, and with the leadership of Charlotte Griswold and Mary Dirks, dramatic readings of various plays began to be performed at the library by a group called Players 2, which eventually grew to fill the old Lime Grange Hall with enthusiastic audiences. In 1985, the library hired Judith Smith, who had studied computers and library automation. The town and private donors provided funding for the library's first computer terminal. That same year, the Friends of the Library took full responsibility for an annual book sale and purchased items from the library's wish list. Once again, the organization that began as the Ladies' Library Society in the early 1920s came through with flying colors. By the early 1990s, the library's programs were flourishing, but more space and major repairs to the original structure were desperately needed at an estimated cost exceeding $100,000. But the money was found, and shortly thereafter an architectural firm was chosen to lead the plan that would expand the usable space from 5,500 square feet to nearly 12,000, with shelf capacity for 40,000 volumes, seating for 70 people, and a larger staff workspace. There would also be modern restrooms, handicap access, a community room, and 30 parking spaces. The estimate for the expansion was $3.5 million. So in 1993, under the leadership of board chair Constance Pike, the Make Phoebe Smile campaign was launched. State and federal grants were secured, and after numerous in-home presentations, a well-organized phone campaign, and the support of Old Lyme Selectmen and Board of Finance, residents authorized a bond issue of $1.5 million. The library board of managers pledged over $300,000, but still a shortfall of $750,000 remained. Once again, the generosity of individuals, families, and businesses from all over Old Lyme met the need, and just 2 years later, the rededicated library was open, with a ribbon cutting and celebration made possible by the local Lions Club. In 2007, seeking to elevate the library's offerings, another fundraising campaign was launched entitled Keep Phoebe Smiling. Chaired by Adela Wilmerding and David Dongermond, the campaign made its case widely known. Thanks to their initiative, support from several family foundations, and widespread community support, the library once again surpassed its fundraising goal. In 2011, the library launched its first website and the Friends of the Library newsletter. Both were award-winning and remain valuable community resources today. In 2020, the nation was struck by COVID, as was the library. But this was not the library's first epidemic. In 1914, the library closed for 5 weeks due to the smallpox epidemic. Despite these challenges, yet another library renovation was undertaken in 2019, an initiative that modernized facilities, updated technology resources, and added to community space, not the least of which was a new outdoor patio for summer events. Again, state funding was granted, and following a town meeting where residents voiced strong support, another generous grant was made from the town of Old Lyme. Once again, as always, the community stepped forward as well, with generous support from trustees, as well as so many other members of the community. The fundraising goal was met. In the last 125 years, Phoebe has come a long way from 2,500 bound volumes. Today's collections number over 40,000. In its 125th year, over 63,000 items were checked out by nearly 4,000 card-carrying patrons, all in the little town of Old Lyme. When it comes to reaching children, the Phoebe is doing more than ever. In the year prior to COVID, 175 kids programs were attended by 3,863 kids, and today, with the threat of COVID in remission, program and participation levels are back on track. Having trouble finding the books or the answers you need? Phoebe's dedicated staff helps patrons thousands of times a year with both research assistance and hands-on technology. And as always, the Friends of the Library continues to be wonderfully generous, operating the bookseller and fulfilling wishes from our director's wish list that help keep our library's computers and technology up to date. The past 125 years have blessed the Phoebe with outstanding leaders in governance, the staff, the volunteers, and most especially the community. Families and individuals have supported the library generation after generation and continue to do so, too many in fact for us to adequately acknowledge in this presentation. One can only wonder if Charles Luddington or Phoebe herself could have imagined that their vision back in 1898 would result in such a robust organization, affecting the lives of so many generations as it continues now and in the future to inspire lifelong learning and discovery in a welcoming place with exceptional resources, programs, and services. Thank you, dear patrons, for being such an important part of what makes our library such a unique place.